Melissa always thought she was a healthy woman. She didn't smoke, rarely ate sweets, and tried to avoid stress. Every morning, she started her day with a cup of coffee and a short prayer, a quiet moment before heading to work. That day, like always, she was getting ready to go to the school where she worked as an English teacher. Suddenly, she felt a strange dizziness. Maybe I'm just tired, she thought, but the feeling didn't go away. Then she felt weak, like her body wasn't her own anymore. Her hands were shaking, and her legs felt like they had lost all their strength. She tried to get to the phone to call her husband, but before she could dial his number, a sharp pain hit her chest. It wasn't just discomfort, it felt like something inside her had clenched tightly and wouldn't let go. Melissa fell to her knees. She felt the ground slipping away from her, and the room around her began to fade. She could hear the voices of her children playing in the next room, but they were getting quieter, as if she was sinking underwater. The last thing she heard was their laughter before everything went silent. Is this the end? She thought. But there was no fear. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm, as if someone was gently holding her hand, telling her not to be afraid. She felt her body become light, like a feather. Darkness surrounded her, but it wasn't scary. It felt comforting, like a warm blanket. Then, in the distance, she saw a light, bright but not blinding. It was calling her, like a lighthouse guiding a ship through a storm. I knew I had to go toward it, she said later. It wasn't a choice. It was like the light was calling me home. As Melissa moved closer to the light, she felt its warmth fill her completely, reaching the deepest parts of her soul. This light wasn't just around her, it was a presence. A presence that filled her with incredible love and peace. She no longer felt pain or fear, just a deep knowing that everything would be okay. But the light didn't just surround her, it began to show her something. At first, they were shadows, faint and hard to see. Then, the images became clearer. Melissa realized she was being shown something important, something that would change her forever. Her journey was just beginning. Melissa saw the earth from above, as if her mind was floating high above the planet. Everything looked familiar and strange at the same time. She immediately knew something was wrong. They showed me how the sky began to change, she said later. The sun no longer shone brightly. It was dim, and its light felt cold, as if it had lost its power. In the mornings, the sky turned deep red, with colors growing darker every day. At night, the stars that used to light up the sky were barely visible. They disappeared one by one, as if someone was turning them off. I saw the faces of people looking up at the sky. Their eyes were filled with fear, but many didn't understand what was happening. They searched for answers, blaming science or talking about the climate. But the real reason was much deeper. Nature began to show signs, too. At one point, Melissa saw a massive earthquake shake the continents. Buildings fell like houses of cards. Mountains cracked, and oceans overflowed, flooding cities. I could hear the screams. People were running in panic, not knowing where to find shelter. They were looking for safety, but there was none, she remembered. But the scariest thing wasn't the destruction of nature. Melissa could feel how people's hearts began to change day by day. She saw fear and anger take over many of them. Neighbors who once trusted each other now looked with suspicion. People fought over food, water, and places to hide. I saw one man trying to help others, but he was rejected and beaten. Kindness had become rare, almost non-existent. That was the biggest sign. It wasn't the disasters, but what was happening inside people. Still, there were others. Some, even in the chaos, started to pray. Melissa saw small groups of people coming together, holding hands, and silently calling out to God. These people glowed, she remembered. Their light was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. And this light protected them. She felt that everything happening wasn't random. There was a greater purpose behind it all. Everything was preparation. A warning. A test. I understood that this was just the beginning, she said. These were the first days, the first signs. The real change was still ahead. Melissa's heart filled with worry for those who didn't understand what was happening. She saw millions of people moving forward blindly, ignoring the signs. That was the moment I realized that people's hearts are the most important thing. Nature can change, disasters can come, but what's inside determines the fate of each person. On the 16th day after the first signs, Melissa saw something extraordinary. She was shown how the heavens began to open, like a thin veil between worlds being torn apart. At that moment, beings of indescribable beauty and strength began to descend. They were angels, Melissa said. Their light was brighter than 1,000 suns, but it didn't blind you. It was the kind of light that made you feel safe and warm, like you'd finally come home. The angels didn't just descend, they came with a mission. They appeared before people, in their homes, on streets, in the most unexpected places. Each person saw them differently, some as glowing beings with wings, some as figures of light, and others as loved ones who had passed away. They spoke every language, but their message was always the same: repent. The time is near. Return to the light. Melissa saw the angels approach each person, trying to reach their hearts. Some listened with awe, falling to their knees and beginning to pray. But many turned away, dismissing it as a trick or their imagination. I remember one man, Melissa said. He was sitting in a small room, surrounded by bottles and memories of his broken life. When the angel came to him, he turned away, saying it was too late for him to change. But the angel didn't leave. He kept speaking, saying forgiveness is available to anyone while they are still alive. Melissa saw the man cry, and the light around the angel began to fill his heart. He fell to his knees, and in that moment, the darkness within him disappeared. It was one of the most powerful acts of mercy she had ever witnessed. But not every moment was like this. She also saw people laughing in the faces of angels, calling them illusions or tricks of fear. Some even tried to drive them away, not realizing they were rejecting their last chance. It hurt to see the angels leave those people, Melissa said. Not because they didn't want to help, but because those hearts were closed. Day by day, the warnings became more urgent. The angels appeared more often, and their messages grew louder. They showed people visions, glimpses of what would happen if they didn't change their ways. I saw one person being shown what would happen to their family if they stayed in anger and pride. They saw an empty house, broken lives, loneliness. It shook them to their core, and for the first time in years, they prayed, Melissa recalled. Not all visions were frightening. Those who responded saw a future full of light, love, and peace. They saw how their choices could change everything around them. I realized this was humanity's final chance. The angels were fighting for every soul, for every person. But the choice always belonged to them, Melissa said. On the 23rd day, everything changed. Melissa saw the world plunge into complete darkness. This wasn't just the absence of sunlight, but a spiritual darkness that covered everything. The sky was almost black even during the day, and an eerie coldness filled the air. It wasn't a physical cold, Melissa explained. It felt like hope had left the world. I saw people losing themselves. Their faces became grim, their hearts hard. Those who resisted the darkness looked like isolated candles in the deep night. Melissa watched as evil grew stronger. People whose hearts were already full of fear and anger became more aggressive and cruel. I saw friends turning against friends, families falling apart. It was as if the world had turned upside down, and goodness seemed weak, she said. But the darkness wasn't just inside people, it was alive. Melissa saw shapes emerging from the shadows. They were creatures of darkness, faceless yet tangible. They whispered lies to people, feeding their despair and hatred. I saw one man sitting alone in his room. The shadows whispered to him, telling him he was worthless and that it would be better if he ended it all. He nearly gave in, but then he noticed a light coming from the next room. His wife was praying for him. Her light drove away the darkness trying to consume him. The light from believers was the only shield against the darkness. Melissa saw small groups of people gathering to pray. Their prayers created a barrier, making them invisible to the shadows. Every prayer was like a beam of light cutting through the darkness, she remembered. But the darkness didn't give up. Melissa saw massive battles between light and dark forces. Angels fought against creatures filled with hatred and destruction. I saw an angel standing in the path of a massive whirlwind of darkness. His sword of light split the whirlwind apart, but I could feel how much it drained even him, Melissa said. On the 6th day of the final week, the darkness reached its peak. Melissa felt its weight even as an observer. It was a night without stars, without hope, without a single ray of light. But then, something incredible happened. In the darkest hour, I saw a light appear on the horizon. It wasn't just a light, it was something much greater. It was so bright that the darkness began to retreat, she said. The light spread like a wave, covering the entire world. It reached even the darkest corners, forcing the shadows to vanish. People who had held on to goodness felt a sense of relief, as if heavy chains had been broken. I saw people who had been praying start glowing even brighter. Their light merged with the great light, making it stronger. It felt like a great awakening, Melissa explained. She realized this light was a sign of something extraordinary. The darkness weakened but wasn't completely gone. It retreated, preparing for a final confrontation. This week was the most terrifying and the most powerful, Melissa said. I saw battles not just in the world but in every person's heart. Everyone had to make a choice, light or darkness. It was more than an external war. It was a test of the soul. The world held its breath, waiting for the final act. Melissa knew it was humanity's last chance to choose before the inevitable happened. At dawn on the 30th day, the world fell silent. Melissa saw how nature itself seemed to hold its breath. The wind stopped blowing, the trees stood still, and the oceans that had been raging became calm like glass. Even the birds stopped singing. It wasn't just silence, it was anticipation, deep and all-encompassing. I felt like time itself had stopped, Melissa said later. The whole world was waiting for something magnificent and unavoidable. The wait wasn't in vain. Suddenly, the dark sky, which had been heavy and terrifying, tore open like a great curtain being pulled apart. At the center of the heavens, a light appeared, so bright that it illuminated everything, not blinding but filling the world with warmth and love. Melissa saw people everywhere coming out of their homes, forgetting their fears and struggles. They looked up at the sky, awestruck by the light. Their faces were filled with wonder, not fear. Many fell to their knees, realizing this was the moment they had waited for, or dreaded, their whole lives. Then, from this light, a figure appeared. I saw Jesus descending from the heavens, Melissa said, her voice trembling with emotion. His presence is impossible to describe. It was so majestic that nothing else mattered. But his majesty wasn't frightening, it filled your soul with peace, love, and truth. Jesus was surrounded by countless angels, each shining like a star. They sang, and their voices sounded like music the world had never known. The music filled every heart, washing away fear, pain, and sorrow. I saw those who had true faith begin to glow. Their souls seemed to connect with the heavenly light, Melissa recalled. But for those who had rejected the truth, it was different. They tried to hide, to escape the light that revealed everything, every thought, every action. Melissa saw the darkness in their hearts being exposed, yet many clung to it, unwilling to let go. It was painful to watch them. It wasn't the fear of punishment, it was the agony of realizing they had rejected the chance they were given, she said. When Jesus drew closer, his eyes met each person's. It wasn't just a glance, it was a moment of truth for every soul. In his gaze, there was love, forgiveness, but also justice. I saw people weeping, understanding they were standing before him, the one they had ignored or denied for so long, Melissa said. Then, the world began to transform. The earth was renewed. What had been destroyed was restored. Burnt fields turned green. Rivers that had dried up flowed again. The world was filled with light and life. It was like a new chapter, a new earth, Melissa said. Jesus stretched out his hands, and his voice echoed across the world. It was a voice that everyone heard in their own language, deep in their soul. Come to me, all who have sought. The time of fulfillment has come. Melissa saw millions of people walking toward him, their faces shining with a joy beyond words. But there were also those who stayed behind, their faces filled with sorrow and regret. This was the greatest moment in human history, Melissa said. But it was also the moment of choice, the final choice for everyone. As the light began to fade and the vision ended, Melissa realized she had been sent back to Earth to share this truth. She knew the world still had a chance, but that chance wouldn't last forever. The return of Jesus is not just the end, it's a new beginning, Melissa said. And everyone must be ready for that moment. When Melissa woke up in the hospital, the doctors and nurses around her were in shock. The monitors showed her heart had stopped for over 10 minutes. By all medical standards, she shouldn't have survived without severe consequences. But she was awake, her eyes clear and full of peace. One doctor, still holding her wrist to check her pulse, said in disbelief, "This is impossible. We lost you, but you're here." Melissa didn't answer right away. She stared at the ceiling, as if recalling something vast and indescribable. Finally, she spoke softly. "I came back because I have to tell you the truth." From that day on, her life changed. She began sharing her experience with anyone willing to listen. Her words carried sincerity and the weight of what she had seen. 30 days is a gift given to people so they can find the truth. But the choice must be made now. Her story became a reminder that time is not endless. Everyone has the chance to change their life before the great moment comes. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and powerful stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message.